Hello and welcome to Truth, Wellness, and Psychic Adventures. I'm Kristin, and as always, with me is Polly. Polly, how you doing?
Oh my God, I'm doing so well. Kristin, how are you?
I'm good. I'm fresh out of the Pilates studio, ready to have a nice conversation with you and welcome our amazing guest, Nichole Bigley. She's with A Psychic Story. That's her podcast. Polly and I have been listening for quite a while, and I feel really, really lucky to have this moment to talk with Nichole. Nichole, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, thanks for coming on. So I think we start at the very beginning and give the listeners kind of the background on one of your first memories that you have, which I find fascinating. I heard it on your podcast before, and I'd love it if you could share it with everyone because it really is the coolest.
Sure. Yeah. So I was about 4 years old. My dad was tucking me into bed, and he was explaining to me his beliefs that we choose the life when we come here to Earth and we pick our family. And I kind of cut him off and said, I know, Dad. And he had this look of shock on his face and surprise. And so he said, well, what do you mean? Tell me more. And I just remember being on what I call the other side, which was everywhere and nowhere at once. I would imagine what we would say was like space, but there weren't planets and stars. There was just like this empty, vast space. And at the same time, time didn't really exist. So that was the first kind of experience / memory that I had. And then when he said, tell me more, I remember looking down. Best way I can describe it is looking at Earth. And, you know, in the movies where they're panning to the ground and Earth and you see the clouds parting and then you get closer and closer. That's literally what I was seeing in my mind. And as it started to get closer to Earth and the ground, I saw this little girl playing outside. And she had this dress, this long, curly, dark hair. And I said, her, that's her. I want her to be my mom. And I went to step forward. It's kind of, again, hard to explain because I
just got goosebumps when you said that.
Yeah. And I went to step forward almost like, okay, like I'm ready to go or what have you. And I heard this voice. I guess you would kind of describe, it wasn't God, but like this booming voice of it's not time yet. And I got really disappointed and then went to kind of take a step back and move away. And then I heard it's time. And then the next thing I remember is, or in this memory again, this experience I'm describing to my dad, I'm going down to Earth. And I was essentially like in the womb. That part's a little fuzzy, of course. And then I actually remember birth, like the coming out and the doctors in the room and just having this moment of as soon as I was being born. Can I cuss on here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Highly encouraged.
I mean, I didn't say this as a soul or a baby, but I remember looking back going like, holy shit, I did this again. And just almost this feeling of heaviness, like physical feeling of heaviness of being in a physical body. And so I'm explaining all this to my dad. He's kind of like, what is going on here? And texts me and I go to sleep. I wake up the next morning. My mom's making my breakfast and she's like, so Dad told me that you told him an interesting story. Tell me a little bit about it. Told her the exact same thing. So from that moment forward, I think my parents knew that they had a very different child on their hands. But I thought it was normal. I was just explaining what I thought he and everybody else had these memories of.
And he must have been on board because I love that he was telling you how we choose the life we want.
Mm-hmm.
When we're up in heaven or wherever we are, we kind of have a plan on the life that we're going to experience when we go down. So this couldn't have been like, I mean, I'm sure he was surprised that his daughter had this memory, but it couldn't have been too far off from his belief system if he kind of presented the story to you like that.
Yeah, at the time. Now I don't think he believes in all that anymore, which is kind of weird and a whole nother conversation for another day. But at the same time, it wasn't. And I talked to him about this as I got older. It wasn't him planting seeds. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like he started the conversation, and I so offhandedly said, "I know, Dad. Like, you don't need to tell me." And then I explained to him, kind of thing. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think at that time he was shocked and he thought it was really cool.
And I think two things here. I think, one, the idea that you wanted to step forward and it was like, no, it's not time yet. That whole thing is like, well, time is an illusion. Like, what the heck is time? Which Polly knows. I'm forever confounded with this. I'm always like, what is time? I want to understand it. I feel like it gets away from me. The concept is almost too big for my little mind to handle. And then the second thing I'm thinking is, like, as a mom, Polly and I each have 3 kids. Now they're older, they're not 4, but I would be blown away. Like, I'm trying to relate to your dad, and that would be quite a story to hear from your little
Mhm.
4-year-old you're tucking in. That must have blown his mind a little bit.
Yeah. And what was really neat about it, looking back,
Mhm.
having now the adult experience is, and I've heard other practitioners say this too, especially when you have children and you want to ask questions, but you don't want to plant the seeds. You don't want to necessarily encourage, but you want to nurture depending on their experiences or the stories they have. And I think it helped me remember more and kind of keep those memories, because maybe if he hadn't asked or there hadn't been the conversations, because then of course my grandparents were asking me, my aunts and uncles, because my family's like, what's going on with our daughter? She shared this fascinating story.
Mhm.
Do you think it's a real experience? And so it kind of helped me hold on to that, because it felt like yesterday.
Yeah.
At that age, it didn't feel like, now it feels a little bit far removed, but at the time it felt like it was just yesterday. Cause I guess really, like you said, time doesn't really exist. So for me, it did feel like that. Like I had
Right.
just come here.
And to be a kid where there's no limitations in your thought and you just kind of have the thoughts and share them without feeling so constricted. And now as an adult, we'd be like, well, I'm not going to say that because that would sound quite odd.
Mhm.
And you second guess yourself all the time.
Mhm.
That would be.
Absolutely.
Polly, did your kids ever hit you with any kind of memory like that?
Yeah, well, more like just things that they knew.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know what I think is interesting is like when we're on the other side, we obviously have to have some excitement towards coming back, right? We're like picking our parents, picking whatever. There's some excitement, some anticipation. And then when we go through the birth now, we're like, oh my God. Here we go. We're climbing up the mountain again.
That is a memory I honestly can't get out of my head, which I'm not going to describe for your listeners, but that, I mean, obviously very constricting. It was a beautiful experience, but I can't express the moment, I guess, of, it wasn't fear as much as, like I said, holy shit, I'm here again. The cold, the heaviness, the bright lights. And my mom, honestly, because she asked me to relay the story again as I got older. And she's like, well, explain to me exactly what you saw. And so
And I'm
I
guessing she
explained.
had like a vaginal birth. Like there was that.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so I explained exactly how, now I don't remember, but, and she could probably relate better than I can, even because it's like seared into her memory, but
Right.
it was how many doctors, how many nurses, where was the bed, where were people standing? I remembered certain things. It was just, and she was just like, so.
Wow. Yeah, because in all
Mhm.
the research we do, like, why does the baby cry when it comes out? Well, it's because it went from a warm, cozy to bright lights and cold.
It was just a shock to the system. And so I haven't had children, but if I had chosen to, I would have definitely probably even looked at more of like a water birth or other things like that, just given my experience, my birth experience that I had, because it was so shocking to my system.
It's weird because I did labor and delivery. I worked as a labor and delivery nurse.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
during that time, you're like, you're obviously focused on mom's comfort, whatever, whether she wants to do natural or whatever she wants to do. But the focus is on that. You look at the baby's heart rate just for safety, but you're not really thinking about, that baby's, it's not comfortable getting squeezed and pushed out. But you don't ever really think about that because you're just really looking at the heart rate. Is the baby safe?
You were
Is
nice and warm and comfortable and
Yeah,
cozy,
and then it comes out and it's effing cold. And then these hands like move you around. You get your vitamin K shot. You get all this stuff. You get right. It's like there's a whole
you get
bunch of
snipped.
stuff going on.
You get
Right?
all that.
And, okay, here's something weird, you guys. I just feel like sharing it.
Oh, I love this. Story
Well,
time.
Me too. I don't even know what she's going to share yet. I
Well,
love it already.
okay, so this is probably like 20 years ago, but there was this guy and he was just like a friend, but because I was married with children, but anyhow, he really like put a lot of emphasis on, he worked with young kids. So he put a lot of emphasis on their birth story and all of that. His memory, he remembered being circumcised. He remembered the color of the walls. He remembered everything. And it brought him like trauma.
Yeah, understandably
Yeah,
so.
so he had so much trauma in his life from that circumcision memory. Isn't that weird?
No,
Yes.
I don't find it weird at all. I mean, I think that we discount so much about
Yeah.
what is considered that is very traumatizing, but
Oh yeah.
we assume children at that age or babies at that age don't remember.
That's
Yeah.
correct. It's not, you do feel like, of course, the procedure is traumatizing, regardless of the age. Now, you're older, your memory is going to come in, but like you've just proven with your experience of your earliest memory that this is highly possible. Someone's going to remember that kind of
Hmm.
unfortunate procedure.
Hmm.
Isn't that crazy? Plus, not only that, think about the way relationships are formed, like from the delivery, right? Like I used to think about the moms that were so stressed and so much pain. How are they going to bond with their babies, right? Because they are so uncomfortable and so scared. So there's so much of that birth experience that really affects us as we move through the world.
I love that. And one of the other early memories I had was we were not in the hospital, but I remember I was definitely a newborn. And because I also remember the room and what it looked like. Of course, you can't adjust all your eyes, so a little bit of it's fuzzy. But I remember laying on my mom's heart and like the warmth of it and how she was like, how moms hold and cuddle babies.
Mhm.
And I remember feeling that's how I felt. I didn't have the words, so I'm describing how I know to say it now. But it was like, I remember this is how I felt like in the womb, but now like it was the energy of what I call like a heart hug of that exchange,
Oh,
that motherly bond. And it's still something that I think about all the time.
I
that's
love
so
that.
sweet. I do too. That's, oh my God, that's so sweet.
It is.
And then you would carry on seeking more of that in life, right?
Yes,
Because it's such
absolutely.
a, right? It's that feeling of connection.
Hmm.
Hmm.
You crave it for sure.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so nice.
So, 4 years
Wow.
old, your dad's tucking you in. You hit him with that memory, Nichole.
Yes.
And then what was the next thing that you remember that kind of brought you back to the idea that you might be a little bit different than your kindergarten partner?
I'll share a story. It may sound a little weird. Well, maybe
We
not to you
love
guys,
weird.
but
We specialize in
it
weird.
was a little weird for when I was growing up and asking my friends. So they're like, no, we did not have this experience. So I remember literally walking down. At the time, we lived in New Orleans, Louisiana. My family moved around a lot when I was growing up, and at that age, I think I was about 7. And I'm walking down the sidewalk, and this thought came in my head, and it was very profound, and it was, I'm a human being. I'm walking down the sidewalk here on earth, and no one else, no other human being is having this exact experience that I'm having, looking through my eyes, smelling the air, feeling the wind, all of those things. And it was just like almost like this, when they talk about from a psychological perspective, like your human brain and forming conscious awareness and everything else. But it was such a deep, profound thought that I was still connected to everything else around me, but having this fully human experience, which is why I love the saying, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, or spiritual beings having a human experience, because it so resonates with me. And in that moment, I thought it was just almost, it wasn't an awakening, but it was almost this like soul growth aspect. And again, I'm a child having this experience. So that was the other kind of profound, I don't want to say memory, but experience that I had. So I'll kind of pause there, and then I have another one about my angels and how I started to connect with them. But wanted to just see if you have any thoughts or comments about that.
Well, it sounds like you had a revelation, like a
Mm-hmm.
note of like the great I am, like I am here,
Mm-hmm.
I am present. Like you just took a moment. And what makes me sad about that, like I'm thrilled that you had it. And I feel like I had something like that. I can remember I was putting laundry away my socks, when I was in like 3rd grade. And I had a moment, and I've never had anyone describe it until you did just now. So that really resonates with me. And I think about my kids, and I wonder, like, this is going to be a conversation I have with them tonight for sure, like just casually, not like a formal family meeting, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much time on cell phones, and there's so much like stimulus all around, that the idea of being present and like contemplating, or just allowing thoughts to be flowing through you and connecting with everything else, that's so limited now. And it almost makes me sad for the youth of today, because I feel like you had a moment that was very special and very deep, and not crazy. It was almost like you recognized what was real because you had some open space and you were ready to receive it.
Yeah, I've heard of people. I don't know a lot about this, but it's called like walk-ins, where there's human bodies and then souls come into the human body later. So, there's a bunch of different schools of thought, but that the soul attaches or the spirit attaches before the baby is birthed. Then also when you're actually born, the soul comes through. I don't know the answer to that, other than I know my conscious awareness was still in the womb, whether I was in the body or not as I was being birthed. But it was this like light bulb moment of almost certain levels of that consciousness coming online. And it makes me think that that's not just the psychological, again, or the emotional development of children and as we get older, but that it is an evolution of our soul's growth and journey.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So then the other experience that I had, and again, I don't always know the exact ages, but this was around kind of the same time. So like 4, obviously we talked about that 7 age, around that same time from like 5 to 7, I would be playing in my room. Again, we moved around a lot. So that was part of, I had to have a lot of creative imagination and playing by myself and that sort of thing, especially as we were just getting established in other areas. And I remember very distinctly at one point, it's kind of like the way I describe it is if the two of you were in a room together, it's different when you're virtual, but if you're in a room together and you're actually having a conversation, you're going to know what each other's energy feels like Polly feels like this, or another loved one that you have or a friend. And so, but you can physically see them, hear them, that sort of thing, their essence, their presence. So I just distinctly felt something in the room with me, but it didn't feel human-like. It felt what I now call like more celestial or angel-like. Again, didn't know at the time. And I also remember thinking as a child, like a lot of my friends had imaginary friends and things. I'm like, I don't have an imaginary friend. I don't have anyone like that. What's going on? So I quite frankly thought that they were like making them up, and maybe some of them did. But so all these things are kind of going on in my head, and I feel like this presence. And so after a while, I get really brave. I wasn't afraid. I was just more curious than anything. And so I asked out loud, who are you? What do you want? And it was this knowing and this thought in my head. And I just heard, I'm Michael. And then now looking back and being more into my psychic development and everything, I now know it was Archangel Michael. So Michael and other angels have been with me from childhood as I've grown up. But that was the other experience that I had. And when I started explaining this to my family, again, my mom, my dad, my extended family, they were very, open to it. They just said, let's talk about it amongst ourselves, but let's not share it with like your teachers or your friends or anything else. And I didn't understand that at the time because I thought, again, everything was normal. And I even asked, I was like, well, who do you have? Again, I didn't know necessarily to call it an angel or even a spirit or a soul or whatever. I just thought this was energy that everybody connected to.
Yeah, because when you're a kid, I mean, even now, like we don't know how our minds work. You just assume like, oh, well, you have a mind, so it must work like that too. So you're probably thinking, well, Michael came to my room. I wonder who came to your room. Did you have any siblings? Were you an only child?
I was an only child until I was 9.5.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Okay. Wow. So then you knew not to exactly run out to your friends and share this.
Exactly.
But did you ever?
Not. Actually, not until I got into my teenage years.
Okay.
Yeah, I listened to my family. Again, I wasn't really in fear about it. I just was like, okay, there's a reason.
Yeah.
There were certain things that did happen as I was growing up, whether it was in particular teachers. I would find like when I would say things, because, it's an adult, you look at authority figures. And when we moved around a lot, the only authority figures were either my parents and or teachers and things like that. And I remember saying things and then they'd be like, don't say that, Nichole, don't make lies, don't make up stories, that sort of thing. And so that's also another way that I remembered, okay, so yes, my family said, don't tell. But it was really, I thought they meant the children because I was open with the adults.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. A child brain would think that would be the rational ruling. When you, so you had that moment.
So I just stopped at that point. I was like, okay, I'm not going to share my experiences, tell my stories because, I got that reaction.
Yeah. So that kind of shut it down just a little bit and kept it. When you, so after that initial, like Michael is in your bedroom, did that open a door and you felt like you could communicate with him all the time?
Well, I think what it is, and looking back and what I try and explain, again, I don't have children, but for people that do come to me and that they do have children and want to know a little bit more about this, it's more about allowing the experience to happen and just asking the questions of tell me more, tell me more. So that's the first thing. Looking back as a child, it was more, it's not something I had access in a doorway. It was almost like a remembering or a remembrance. And so Michael to me felt like when I was on the other side and we were all connected and we are not disconnected, just like life force energy is. I know I'm getting deep here, but it was just all this, it felt familiar. It felt comfortable. I remembered it. It wasn't any different than you and I having a conversation, other than it wasn't verbal like this. It was more telepathic and more energetic through intuitive abilities. And looking back, I have so many fond memories of, being like playing like with energy balls and, Michael explaining to me about different people and different circumstances and situations and how to interact. And it was things that I use to this day to help other people. It was just, it's amazing when you think about it, because when you don't have that door shut necessarily, and you remember it, it's just always a part of you.
So then at that point, Michael was kind of like your coach. Like he would come in and share different things with you and you were just open to receiving it.
Yes.
Okay. That's so cool. I love that.
So are your clients primarily in this discovery mode, or most, would you say?
It all varies. I have a lot of people that usually come to me who are empaths because I'm an empath as well. And I find that empathy and emotions tend to rule, at least me in my life, the energy so much and how we react to things. And so there's that. But I would say that there are a lot of people that do come just wanting to have that connection. And so, which is why I wrote the book that I did with with my co-author, Looking for Angels, because it is all about remembering and tapping into the intuition that's already accessible to you, because that's how our angels, our spirits, our loved ones connect with us.
This is perfect, because I wanted to talk about that book a little bit more. So this is the perfect segue.
Okay,
Can you tell us a little bit more about it, and then who your co-author is and kind of why you wrote it, and who would be the ideal person to read it? Because I would say everybody, but tell me who you were thinking of when you were writing.
So Polly, you teed it up beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly.
A lot of people that I noticed that were coming and asking me questions was because, I don't really talk a lot about myself on my show. It's interviewing other guests like you guys do. I don't like to really chat about myself. It feels different. But anyway, here we are. And so a lot of people that would come would ask me, how do I connect with my guides and angels? And so I was literally preparing for a session one evening, and I heard, so I don't know how you guys receive your information, but I heard it in my head, and it was, you need to write about us. And I got a little annoyed. So I'm like trying to prepare for this client. I'm trying to get information. But the question that the client had was, how do I connect with my guides and angels? How do I connect, with loved ones, that sort of thing. And I started to see patterns and things that people were asking when they came to me, but also a lot of the information from spirit coming through. So I kind of pushed it aside and I said, I got to prepare for this session. That said, I absolutely will, review this or talk to you about it later. So after the session, I wrapped and I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean I need to write about you? Is it a blog post? I do a podcast already. Can I just talk about you? Do I have to actually write? And they're like, no, it's so that people can go back and they can refer to it, all these things. So I was like, okay, great. But who has the time? And so this was when I was in the time frame of my life where I was really trying to set energetic boundaries with spirit, because a lot of information that comes in, it always feels urgent. You feel like you have to do it immediately right away. At least I do personally. And so I said, if you want me to write about you, I absolutely will. However, I need the time. I need someone to help me write it. I need the resources, the funding, all that, because podcasting isn't cheap, all those things. And so I thought by doing that bought me some time, that would take maybe a year, 2 years to manifest, to come in. And about 48 hours later, not even 48 hours, I have an email from my co-author, my now co-author, Dr. Scott Guerin. And he said, hi, Nichole, I'm not expecting you to get back to me at any point because you're probably super busy, but I'm writing a book about angels.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm self-publishing or we can go to a publisher, but I need somebody to talk about modern day angels and how to connect. And I was like,
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And so that's how we talked. And so he wrote the first part of the book, which I guess he's in a different place in his spiritual journey and growth. And it was all about angels and religion, psychology, and science, and looking more at the data and all of his learnings along the way, and really wanting to then understand how do I continue that connectedness to oneness to spirit and communicate. So then my second half of the book is, how do you do that?
Amazing. I love that. And I mean, you have to laugh at how it came to you. Like,
I was like mad, but at the same time, I couldn't be mad because it was exactly what I asked for.
Yes. It was just and once again, time. Time is an illusion.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a beautiful example, which people always say all the time. Not only be careful what you ask for and you will receive, or ask and you shall receive, but it's also about when it needs to happen. Like, again, I think this is very important for people to hear. This is what I'm hearing intuitively, is when messages come through from spirit, or you feel called or led for a purpose, or you really are driven to do something in particular, it's going to feel urgent because it is important, because it's coming from source. Yeah. The timing universally, or however that works, is one thing. And so sometimes we want it right now, whether that's a relationship or a job or a house or whatever. Others, it like feels more like a chore, because when you're tuning in, it's big work that you have to do. So there's all these things that come into consideration. So I just set it and released it. And then when it boomerangs back like that, that's your sign of, okay, whatever that timing is, and it lines up so easily, that's when you're like, okay, I can't not take advantage of this or take the steps.
Exactly. Like, very well said. So I want to backtrack just a second. I got excited about the book and I had to share that. But your teenage years, like, how were those with this, like, kind of going on and communicating with angels? Teenage years are tough. I have 3 teenagers. Polly's got a teenager and 2 olders. And it's hard years. And I'm wondering, like, what it was with that gift rolling in you to go through your teenage years.
Yeah, that's a great question, in the sense that I haven't really talked about in a lot of detail, only because I try to lay part of it out. So I was, what I mentioned before, that we moved around a lot. Every 9 months to 2 years, we would move. So by the time I was in high school, I'd never really had friends necessarily like childhood friends that I'd grown up with. So my teenage years, I still had like that independence and didn't necessarily care what people thought, because I've been doing my own thing for so long. I was still very much into spirituality. I was reading, oh my gosh, what is her name? I'm totally blanking on it. I'll send it to you guys. Oh, Linda Goodman. So Linda Goodman had some really far out thoughts at the time. I'm reading her books like Dolores Cannon, all those things. I would have at that time my 8-year-old, 7-year-old sister, I'm terrible with math. I would have her like read me past life regressions. I would like be doing the past life. So because, they didn't have a lot of tapes and CDs on the time.
The best would be if she would tell people, you know what, I learned to read by reading my sister these past life regressions.
Yes, exactly. And so so we bonded as sisters in that. But also, to answer your question about my friends, they knew I was always like the weird friend, but they were also totally into it. Yep. Tarot cards, oracle cards, that sort of thing. I was always, don't want to say I'm like the party trick friend, but they would ask me all these questions. And so my teenage years were okay from that perspective. I didn't really start to turn it off until I went to college, because at that point, you're getting serious about life. What's my career? And at one point I was on another podcast and I said something like, when I went to school, there wasn't like the Harry Potter, like Hogwarts type of thing. And she's like, well, there absolutely was. Well, when I went to school, I didn't know. Google didn't exist. There weren't search engines, that sort of thing. Yeah. So when I went to school, it was like, okay, I got to get serious about life. And so I veered dramatically off. And that's when I definitely wasn't doing all of that other stuff.
So you're...
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Polly.
Okay, yeah. How did it affect like your date? Like when you were dating, because eventually you melded into that land.
I would say less when I was obviously in college, because it wasn't part of the issue, but it has been kind of like blips on radars. A big part of my soul's journey. I don't really want to say we have soulmates. I mean, we do have soulmates, but not in the way that at least I don't think that people, how they evolve. So it's more like, how do I say this? I feel more committed to like spirit and source and like the spiritual way of life than I do dating. and romantic relationships. It's not because it's not for me. It's just, it hasn't evolved that way. I remember having a conversation. I must have been 12, 13 with my dad. This is, we've had some big ones. And I said, I just don't know if I'm going to get married and I'm going to have kids. I'm going to do that whole thing. And not just him, but every other adult would say, well, you're going to change your mind when you get older. You're going to change your mind when you get older. And I always just knew I wanted to do bigger things, not because it's not a beautiful thing to have a relationship and to be married and all of that. It just felt conformed. Like, society was saying, you got to go to college, and this is before people were really talking about it big picture. So I say all that because it impacted me in a way where I felt like my beliefs would have had to stuff them down, my beliefs, my experiences more, if I had gone more in that dating / relationship track. I had beautiful relationships, throughout my life, but it just was never really a priority.
Yeah, it's interesting. And did you feel like your angels were like watching out for you so that you went out, you didn't go out with a dud, so to speak?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was a couple other things. There were, spoiler alert, there were no marriage proposals on the table, but that's also because the marriage proposals didn't happen, because I would start to date or I would go into these relationships and intuitively, my own intuition would be like, no, this isn't. But also I would see these flashes forward from my spirit team of, this is how it's going to be. And some of them were very beautiful. And then some of them were not so great. And I was given the choices consciously in my own awareness of, are these the experiences you want to have? And I'm like, nope, I'm good.
So you would have an experience with someone, like maybe he asked you out and then you had a moment where you fast forwarded to what that would look like, a life with him, and then you could make the choice. Yeah. That is a fantastic vision.
Yeah. Yeah. They, I get, it's not really premonitions, I guess, because it's not like I would get these flashes of dreams or whatever. It's more tuning into the energy and being able to see, I guess it is more premonitions, like a future state. Okay. And I would see what my life would be. So whether I dated this person for 9 months or what have you, and kind of tapping in and tuning in. And that's one of the other things that I feel is it helps me, at least with my friends and family, because I do this more for them. I don't do this unless they ask, but where I can look at different situations, like you were talking about timelines. Part of my thought or belief is that we live in multiple lifetimes and multiple existences simultaneously. When we make certain choices, it's that multidimensional thing. We sparse off, right? So when people talk about jumping timelines or moving to the other existences, at any point, we can kind of jump consciously to them. So what I'm essentially kind of doing is looking at that spider web out of what is the existence that I want.
My mind's blown.
Sorry.
I'm like, let me think about that. And I've listened. Okay, so you have a psychic story podcast, and then you have another podcast that I want to talk about too, because I'm not as familiar with. I obviously am an avid listener of a psychic story, and you've touched on this concept in a couple of your episodes. And it blows my mind every time. Like the idea of time isn't linear, and you can jump timelines. It's so interesting to me. And I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and I get better and better at it, but it's just mind-blowing. Yeah. Like,
I'll give you a little bit more of an example, because I always believed it, meaning in my heart. And it's kind of like one of those, when you can't, you just happen to know it. You can't, whatever. But also I'm very logical in the sense that unless something happens, I don't necessarily truly believe it. Like I'm open, but sometimes I have to have these experiences to kind of prove it or validate it. And very, very long story short, I was heading for a work trip with my full-time job to the airport, which I had gone to 20, 30 times in this new place that I live. And as I'm driving this other time, the way to the airport is completely different. It's not because, they did construction or anything else. When I get to the airport, the parking is different. When I get to the airport, the whole signs are different. And I felt like I was having this out of body. Like I'm looking around like, where are the cameras? Where's just the whole thing was so strange. And I had this moment of, I am in a completely different place. So meaning of where I am. And it was at that point that a lot of things were happening in my life where then it started to veer off and go into other directions. but I had consciously made some choices. And then I realized now I'm definitely in this different thing, but that's the first time I've heard people talk about it, but it wigged me out. Honestly, it wigged me out to the point where I was like, I called my mom and I said, just check on me.
Right.
Just check on me.
Yeah.
Sure
Cause at that
I'm
point you're like, am I
mentally
taking
sane.
crazy pills? What's going on?
Exactly. And then after that was fine, but it was a very strange thing. But yes, it blows the mind when you have to kind of wrap it around that.
So is step one just awareness, like kind of being, okay.
Absolutely. Yes. It's what I like to, one of the things that Michael, again, taught me, my guides and angels is, and this is beautiful. It's like not my idea. This is a concept that is across different types of spirituality and religious beliefs as well, is being conscious and present and aware. And I like to do it based on how am I feeling? How am I feeling mentally? How am I feeling physically? How am I feeling emotionally? How am I feeling spiritually?
Okay.
And by just doing that, you're tuning into all of those energetic layers, which all compose of your energy and your presence and your conscious awareness.
Okay.
And when that's your presence, and that is your state of oneness. And then that's when you see all the beautiful things happen and you're just aware. It's like being awake.
Wow. Okay. That's so cool.
I was going to add to like the way I see, because I see everything happen, all lives happening now. But with that being said, I also see the peripheral. Like if we look at now containing all lives, all whatever, the peripheral is continuously expanding, right? There's this electric energy is continually expanding, and I think that's the possibilities. That's the unknown. That's the manifestation. That's the what has yet to be manifested. That's what has yet to be, right? So there's all this energy of possibilities and it's constantly expanding. So there's like this, there's limitless possibilities. It's not just what we have,
correct,
what we know, right? There's just so much. And it's really interesting. And the other thing that they've shown me is like how we look at time. If you want to call it time, it's not really time, but if we look at things and everything's happened, all lives, happening now, but there's also a folding in. So if you imagine that that's like a bread, like a thing of bread, there's also this folding in, like where the edges fold back in to each other. I love that. And that creates a whole nother thing of healing, a whole nother thing of getting to know who you are and getting in the universe. And so it's like everything is constantly changing, but I think it's weird, like this folding in and recreating the scenarios, if you will.
I just got chills when you said that. I love that because we think about it like this.
Yeah.
We're born, we do these things, we die. Boom, 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 like linear. But what you're talking about, it's like this, it's like it's the Big Bang. It's like,
it is. It's like they literally show me, it's like folding in, like if you have a thing of dough. Not that I cook or bake or whatever, or you fold it back in. And that's what's so interesting about like how we recreate and how we heal and how we get to redo, right? We get to redo, we get to re-experience, right? Like, and it's like all these little fragments coming together.
Yeah. And that's the feeling I'm getting is the possibility and the idea that starting anew, and just because something ran amok doesn't mean it's kaput. Like you go back in and just keep the kneading of the sourdough bread.
The kneading of the sourdough bread. Oh my God, there's your book, Kristin.
It's like, yeah. Oh yes. A lovely title. No, it's infinite. When you were talking, Polly, I literally saw the infinity sign. Yeah. That's what infinity is. And that's what they mean.
Yeah. It's so cool.
It's neat.
This is a separate time, but that's literally what I want to do on my next book is really talking about like that, like beyond the human experience. Like it's beyond the human experience. It's understanding creation and how
I'd read that.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't have it all yet. It's still
Who does? It'll come to you.
It's still up here or out there. It's in the garden.
I love it. I got to ask Nichole one more thing here.
Yeah.
So Polly and I always joke that I'm in the psychic closet, but because like I said, I have 3 kids. I own a Pilates studio in the community. I haven't really told many people about this part of my life, and it's leaking out, and I love that. But I'm always curious, like how you, and I don't even know what you did right after college, but whatever career you had, how did you kind of bring your spirituality to the forefront? And did you shock any people when you said it, or were you just so secure that it didn't matter? I aspire to be the latter, but I'm curious with your experience.
Yeah. So I'm in communications and marketing, which is not ironic, because I say like I communicate with the living and I communicate with the dead and all of in between, full time, in the day and then in the evening. But anyway, so when I was in college, I struggled with what is it? Obviously, a lot of people do. What do you want to do with your life? And I am really good at communication. And so that was the PR marketing aspect of my life. And so I did that for several years. And I would say, whatever you call it, cliche, but about maybe 7 years or so ago, I was having just this existential crisis of I have everything I want, the relationship, the job, the house, the car, like everything. And also things were just manifesting because I was, yes, in the psychic closet with my full-time job and with my career and that brand, so to speak, if you want to call it that. My friends and family obviously knew about my life, and I was living kind of these dual lives.
Yes.
And and it was really hard because it's a part of who I am. So it's not like I'm ever going to push a topic or a conversation on someone that doesn't want to go in that direction or have that conversation. But it was just hard to not have it be everything. And so I prayed every single, not being religious, but spiritual. Like I would pray to my guides and angels, God, universe, source. I would ask my higher self every single night for almost like 7 months. Like, what do I do? What do I do? I'm just miserable. I feel like I have gotten all the things, going back to looking into my future, what we were talking about before, all those spider webs. And I was like, I obtained everything I want, or so I thought. So now what? And it took a long time for those 7 months. And one night as I was falling asleep and I was exhausted, I heard, you need to start a podcast. And I go, what? Now, podcasting was like starting. This is maybe about, it'd been around for a long time, but 2 years it was like popular. So this was like about 6 or 7 months before the pandemic really hit. And I said, okay, so I need to start a podcast. I knew nothing about podcasting, even though it was in PR marketing. It wasn't like it is today. And so I said, I'm laughing. This is like kind of similar to the book thing. What? You want me to do something? And they're like, you asked, this is what it is. And I was like, okay, what's it going to be about? What's it called? And they said, a psychic story. And this is what it's going to be. You're going to interview guests. And it's because people need to not feel alone. And you need to be comfortable in your own psychicness and your own psychic ability. And you need to be talking about it. And I was in fear mode because I was afraid. And Polly and I were talking before we hit record here, is that I lived in the South. There are a lot of religious conservative people there. I prep clients to go on. I do crisis and issues management. They're going to think I lost my ever loving mind if I'm out there with, and then I even said, can I change my name? Can I just like be under the guise? And they're like, nope, 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 nope. Now I'm not saying that's for everybody. This is just like my truth. And I was really afraid of that because I thought I was going to lose my job, clients, all those things. And so I did it. And actually the funny part was I was like, there's no way there's not a psychic story. Like it's got to be taken. And they're like, nope. And so the next morning I looked and got all the stuff, did all the things. And so it's like that saying, if a tree falls in the woods, no one's around to hear it. Did it really fall? And so I started the podcast. I think I had 2 listeners, my mom, my grandmother. And then slowly but surely, I started getting listeners and that sort of thing. And it just resonated. But I felt comfortable because I didn't think anyone was going to listen, quite frankly.
And it's funny how that opens the door and you're like, well, whatever. Yeah.
So that's kind of how it came to be.
Okay.
But I will say that there was an urgency to this message, and I didn't understand why. It was kind of like this. I don't know how it works for you guys, but sometimes when I'm tuning in psychically, I feel like it feels like the Wizard of Oz. Like there's this curtain, and I can't go past it. And they're like, nope. Meaning my guides and angels, nope, you can't see past this curtain, but you just need to trust and you need to go. And so when I was doing this, they were like, something big's happening and it's about whatever. And you need to get this up and ready and you can't wait. And then 6 or 7 months later, that's when the pandemic hit. So it was a really big, I think, platform, obviously, me not knowing that was going to happen, but they were preparing us.
Yeah. So trust. There's your
Mhm.
lesson, right? Yeah. Okay, now tell me and the listeners about your other podcast and when that started.
So there's a Psychic Story Kids edition,
Mhm.
and I have not revisited it because life I've been lifing,
Right.
but I am going to revisit it. But part of the urgency there was I kept hearing from my spirit team and also other people. I want to understand my own spiritual journey and hear from other people and their experiences. But now, what does this look like for children?
Mhm.
And so the first season is all for adults who are caretakers of children that either want to learn more or feel like they're children and, others have these psychic abilities, and how can you be supportive? So the future seasons are going to focus solely for kids and teens so that they listen to this content and that they're able to just feel like they have resources and things of that nature. And then my other podcast is Supernatural Matters, and it's a storytelling format where it's things that happen in every day, and it's all about, is it supernatural or is it natural? And it's up for people to decide. So I'm relaunching that next year, and it is going to it's next year. It's only a few months from now.
I know that's a
I'm going to be
concept right
having
there.
people like yourself. You guys are more than welcome to come on, but we're going to talk about some of the stories and then share our theories and tune in to what we think. But so those are my 3 podcasts.
Oh, I love that. Okay, now here's something that I know Polly is interested to know as well. Have you ever been to Jerome, Arizona?
No.
Polly, we have to bring her on our. Polly and I
Yeah.
have this.
Jerome's going to get crowded.
It is.
So what is it? I mean, obviously it's a place, but
Mhm.
why are you asking the question?
Okay, Polly, do you want to tell her about Jerome?
You tell her.
Okay. So we, Polly hosts retreats, like spiritual retreats and things like that. And they're primarily done in Sedona. So one time, and I think it was 2022, maybe 21 or 22,
Yeah.
after the pandemic. And we went to Sedona, and then we took a little road trip to Jerome. Now, Jerome is a city, and it's built like on, think, a mountain. And so it's a
Wow.
tricky drive up, which Polly's daughter drove us. Thank you, Chloe. And drove us up. And then back in the day, it was very secluded because you couldn't get up and down the mountain easily. So you would go up there and you were kind of there. And it was like a little city, like all the things you have in the city,
how
from the
cool.
wealthy to the service workers to the restaurants and the hospital and like a ballroom situation, all that contained in the city, and underground tunnels for yes. So we went to have like kind of a psychic.
Wait, but this is important. The underground tunnels is where they put the sick, the ugly, the unwell,
disfigured. Yes. So apparently, not the highest of vibrations in the underground tunnels.
Not like the foundational element of the earth that's like feeding out everywhere else.
Right.
Yes.
So there was a big hospital back in the day, and it burnt and people died there, and all the unfortunate things that happen in hospitals happened in this hospital. It's been converted into a hotel. So everyone that goes there is completely excited about like the whole experience. And we went on a psychic tour. I don't even know the name of it. I'm butchering the name of it, but essentially a ghost tour. So we didn't tell the leader of the tour guide, about anyone's spiritual gifts in our group. We just got in and she gave us these little measuring barometers. I don't even know, EMF things. And so, but Polly was getting pings the whole time, not through her barometer there. But the biggest one I think that you got was his name Tim? Tommy. So we went to, right before we went on the ghost tour, we went to the restroom, and it was in like a converted place. And I think it was like a tourist thing and an ice cream shop. And then the restroom was there. And then we came out and she was like, Tommy was in there. And I was like, oh my God, there was a guy in the bathroom? No, Tommy was a ping that she was getting. And
by the way, ghosts, like, it's creepy when you're in the bathroom, you're just trying to do your business. Like, it's happened to me before too, where I'm like, do you mind? Like, literally, do you mind? Like, you're getting a show. Yep. You can pay me later.
Exactly. And I assure you, I will be done quite quickly. If you could just wait. Yeah. So she was getting this ping from Tommy about him like in a car. And so when we went on the ghost tour, Polly did ask the tour guide, was there something going on here with cars? And the tour guide said, yes, they would get bored because, you're on a mountain and there's not much to do. And so they would, with their new car, they would drive it around and just cruise. And that was the thing they did for entertainment and to kind of show off their new car and to socialize. So I think the thought is Tommy was trying to tell Polly, I love to cruise.
He was just like,
I was hoping he didn't like get in an accident or something.
No, he was just like, he went round and around and around. And but it didn't make sense. But
you're like, we went round and round and round.
But Ginger clarified that.
Yes.
That's amazing.
That's her name. Yeah.
So cool.
So we always want to go back to Jerome.
Are you guys thinking of like doing retreats there or something? Or are you just wondering if I'd been there?
I wondered if you'd been there, but also I feel like Polly and I are trying to plan some sort of revisit there. And
we should do it together.
Yes.
I've been wanting to do retreats. That's really another thing they've been telling me. Yeah.
The town itself, so not the history of the town, but the current aspect of town is really sweet. Like there's like these cool art shops and stuff. It's very small, like population 500 or something. I don't know, 1,000. It's very small, but the current town has a very sweet vibe to it.
It sounds so fun.
Get into once you dive into it, into the there was a lot of mental instability, like a lot of emotional turmoil.
Yeah.
Well, they were put underground.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds like it. I don't mean to laugh, but
right.
Yeah.
But on the outside, the shell, it's very beautiful. Just don't dig into these.
Just gonna need some people to go in and clear it first. Maybe that'll be part of our work together. If we decide to do a retreat there.
It's a cool town.
It sounds really neat.
It got a lot of depth to it for sure. So, and it's right outside of Sedona.
Yeah. Have you been to Sedona, Nichole?
I have. I've been wanting to go. It's primarily for work, but
I've
been wanting to go spiritually, like for a vacation or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is just the energy. I feel like in certain places around the world, it's amazing where you can feel those. I mean, they call them vortexes and portals, but they exist everywhere, but they're in particular for sure.
Yeah,
I love that.
But with Sedona, I just have to say this. I know we're running out of time. With Sedona, as cool as it is, and the land is amazing, and I'm just shocked it was never made into a national park because it's just so breathtaking. But it's kind of like Jerome, that it's it's got some pretty on the inside, on the outside, deep, and there's some crazy in there too.
Arizona and Utah, both of those states feel like that to me.
Yeah, of course, I've lived in both.
Of course,
right?
There's a reason for it. I don't know what that reason is. We can tune in later, but there's a reason for it.
There is.
You're there to shift energy.
Oh, I think so, and shift it we will. Okay, we are approaching the end here, so. We are launching a new segment in our podcast called Speed Round. And Nichole, you are the first one to experience it.
Oh, yay. I love this. I do a quick Q&A over on my Patreon. So I'm familiar with this.
Yay.
All right. So speed wise, how fast do you want me to be? Because I can be very fast.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I don't know. Let's go as fast as you can. Here's what we'll do.
Okay.
You can tell us whatever you want, a little spiel. And then I'm going to ask you questions when you're done. And it's random questions. So of any topic, and you either can say yes or no, or if I give you a 2-choice thing, then you'll choose one of those.
Love it. Okay. Let's play.
All right. So do you want to say anything for us first, or do you want to hit you with the questions?
Just hit me with questions.
Okay, good. And it's a yes or no initially. Ready? Here we go. Botox.
Yes.
Ouija board.
Yes.
Pilates.
Yes.
Good answer. Green juice.
Yes.
Seance.
Yes.
Organic vegetables.
Yes.
Kickboxing.
Well, depends.
Oh, okay. Kickboxing.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Whitewater rafting.
Yes.
Infrared sauna.
Yes.
Sparkling water or still water?
Still.
Tequila shot or espresso shot?
Espresso.
Tarot cards?
Yes. Although I prefer Oracle.
Ooh, okay. So how would you describe that was it, but how would you describe the difference between tarot and oracle?
Tarot feels like a dissertation.
Okay.
And oracle feels like bullet points. So, if you see that meme, you in danger, girl, that's oracle cards, whereas tarot is going to give you a whole explanation before you get to the headline.
Oh my gosh. I've never heard it explained like that, but yeah, that totally makes sense. Completely. Okay.
Kristin, I just have to say those questions were like a day out of Kristin's life.
Because I
Green
wanted
juice, sauna.
And by the way, I've done all of those, by the way.
Pilates.
The tequila, the espresso, the
Yep.
yeah, like I've done all of it. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because, right, I was at the studio all morning. Maybe I took a tequila shot last night. We don't know. There's no
Well,
judgment.
before you went to Pilates? Just kidding.
Well, then this morning after Pilates, before I came here, I was like, espresso shot. So I swung by the local coffee shop and had a quick espresso shot. So that's why that question came up. I was like, I wonder what Nichole would do. Okay. Tell the listeners how they can connect with you, where they can find you, and all the good things, Nichole.
Well, thank you so much again for having me on. It's been an honor, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. You can reach me at apsychicstory.com. All the social media handles are a psychic story. And you can get the book lookingforangelsbook.com or wherever you get your books.
Yay. And we'll put all of this underneath the show notes and the podcast so we can have that easily accessible from the listeners. Thank you so much. This has been a long time coming, and I am thrilled we got to talk with you.
Again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, ladies.
Yeah, you were. It has been very fun talking with you, learning. And I have to say also, I love your website. I know I told you off air, but check out our website. It's beautiful.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Highly recommend. And look forward to our Jerome retreat.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, ladies.